Morning all, welcome to my studio. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing the story of my mum's death, and then some more entertaining stories about her life. First, I'll give you a bit of backstory. My parents got divorced when I was 2, and I lived with my mum until I was 7, and then with my grandparents till 9, and then my dad until I was 16. My mum had bipolar disorder, and was a smoker and a recreational drug user for most of her life, the drug of choice being marijuana. But she did dabble in some other things prior to my birth. I want to make it completely clear that she never did drugs around me and only smoked near me on occasion. In 2008, she was admitted to hospital with severe abdominal pains. Turns out her bowel had collapsed, and she had to have major operations which left her in intensive care, and she almost died. She pulled through though, but she was never the same after, needing a colostomy bag and nurses to come in once a week and look after her. Prior to this event, she was always really confident, sure of herself, and fun. But afterwards, she was very self-conscious, and a shell of her former self. She moved into a care home when I was 18, which would have made her around 51. It was not an easy task convincing her to move into a care home, but as she was unable to look after herself, her cat, or her home, it was the most logical decision. I lived in another city at this point, and was unable to get to see her regularly. In hindsight, I wish I'd made more of an effort, but I guess I never considered she'd die. That sounds really naive, and I guess it was. After all, her body had been through such physical and mental pain. I really didn't think she could die. I didn't think anything could take her down. However, on the 24th of February 2013, my mum died in her sleep. Cause of death being respiratory failure. I remember my grandma, my mum's mum, ringing me in the morning to tell me. It felt like some kind of sick joke or nightmare. It just didn't feel real. I felt numb, like the whole world was empty. I don't remember crying initially. My grandma said her and my granddad would come pick me up if I wanted, and I asked for them to come pick me up at the weekend. See, I had my interview for university on Monday, and I didn't want to miss it, as I'd been working so hard to get into university. I remember ringing my dad to tell him. Bear in mind, me and my dad weren't on the best times at this moment. But I still didn't cry. That was until my dad did. The shock of hearing my dad cry for someone he genuinely hated just broke me. And after that, I couldn't stop. The next 2 weeks till the funeral are a blank blur. I have a pretty good memory, and I cannot remember what I did during those 2 weeks. I wore a bright blue dress to the funeral, blue being her favourite colour, and I read a poem I'd written, which made a lot of people cry and made me feel really bad. Her ashes were scattered among the roses at the crematorium, which I think she would have liked. The thing about loss is they say it gets easier, and that's true to a point, but you never really stop missing them. The hardest thing for me is when life events happen and I can't tell her about them. I do talk to her sometimes, but as I don't really believe in an afterlife, it's more for me than it is for her. See, Mum was never one to dwell on sad things. So, now that I've covered her death, let's talk about some happy and fun memories I got to share with her. The first one I'll talk about actually happened before I was born, and was told to me by my dad, in a vain attempt to villainise my mum. However, as I got older, all it did was make me laugh at how cool she was before I was born. Now, I do not advocate drug use at all, but people still do it, and there are some good stories that come because of them. So this story takes place somewhere around 1986 to 1988. Mum had bought something called an 8-ball, which if you look it up is somewhere around 3 grams of cocaine. Not not simple stuff, actual cocaine. So you're only supposed to do a small amount at a time, but Mum decided to take it all. Some hours later, she was found by the police directing traffic in the middle of an intersection, completely butt-ass naked, just having a grand old time. I asked her once how she actually ended up naked, and she honestly couldn't remember. The second story is about how she met my dad, or probably more accurately, how he met her. See, my dad was a bus driver in Liverpool, and one day my mum happened to get on his bus. She was wearing this bright red female suit and skirt, a knee-length fur coat that was draped over her shoulders, and a striking red hat. She also wore the same suit to the after party of their wedding, which I'll throw up a picture here for you to see. Safe to say, she was a little bit overdressed for a bus trip into town, but that was Mum. So my dad was smitten at first glance, and my mum was smitten with him. She used to say that my dad could charm anyone with just his eyes and a cheeky grin. She stayed on the bus till the end of the route. They exchanged information and arranged a date. Mum and Dad were married in 1988. I was born in 1992, but unfortunately by 1994 they were divorced. The third story is when I was living with my grandparents. My mum would come home. My mum would come to visit and normally stay the weekend. One thing we loved to do together was play chess or card games. One time she visited, she brought me a new chess set. Simpsons themed, if I remember correctly. We set it up and got to playing. Now I was fairly good at chess, owing to the fact that Mum never let me win or made it easy. But she was still better than me, obviously. I would like to point out I must have been around 8, so I wasn't doing too bad. Well, I thought I had her on the ropes plenty of times throughout the game, but she always managed to wriggle her way out of each jam I thought I had her in. We played for a good hour or so, and it got down to us only having a few pieces left. A few moves later, and we had managed to take all the pieces, apart from both kings. Mum said we should agree to call it a draw, as it was a stalemate and neither one of us could win. I was a very stubborn child and a bit of a sore loser, so I was not about to give up when I was so close to winning. Mum kept saying it was impossible for either of us to win, but I seemed to believe that was opinion rather than fact. The next 5 minutes consisted of her moving a square, then me moving a square, then her moving a square, and me moving a square, and on and on and on. I eventually got so worked up that I threw a bit of a paddy and said I'd quit. Mum informed me that as I'd quit, that means she'd won. Confused, I corrected her, as she'd previously said that it was going to be a draw. Ah, she said. Well, you see, it would have been a draw if we'd have both agreed, but you were too stubborn and ended up quitting. As I did not quit, then by default I win. Now, fun fact about me, if I get worked up, I go one of two ways. I either get really angry or I cry. It's always either one or the other. On that day, it was crying. I just broke down, crying in a fit of frustration. Mum quickly realised she'd gone a bit far in trying to teach me a lesson. She pulled me close, sat me on her knee, and cradled me, stroking my hair. She explained calmingly and soothingly that sometimes you need to know when to accept the loss and walk away. And I've genuinely not been a sore loser since then, having always known when it is the right time to just walk away. The final story for today is a funny one. Well, I think it's funny anyway. I must have been around 10 at this point, and every Saturday my mum would get the train to St Helens where I lived with my dad, and then we would get the train back to Liverpool and spend the day together. We had a standard routine. We'd get off the train, go into WH Smith's in the train station, get Lucozade, when it still came in those Capri Sun-esque pouches, and Juicy Fruit gum, and then we'd go catch the bus to her house. Now, not every weekend, but sometimes we'd go into McDonald's when we got off the bus and get milkshakes. We always got the same thing, chocolate for her and banana for me. However, this time we went in, there was a sign up saying they only had chocolate or vanilla due to an issue with the machine. Side note, I swear to God, right, the milkshake machine at McDonald's is never working correctly, or working at all. I'm sure there's a conspiracy there. Shane Dawson should get on the case. Anyway, we didn't get in the queue as I needed to pick a new flavour. So we stood awkwardly in the door, letting people know as they came in that we weren't in the queue. I eventually picked vanilla, and we queued up, ordered, and paid. We decided to sit in with our milkshakes, even though Mum lived close, as it was a hot day and McDonald's had air conditioning. We sat and took a slurp of our milkshakes. I made a face, as vanilla was pretty boring and not my favourite. I tried to hide my face as I didn't want to cause a fuss, but my mum saw me and asked if I wanted her milkshake instead. I had a little panic, as I knew Mum liked chocolate milkshakes, and I didn't want to take it away from her, but I didn't really like vanilla either, so I was a bit stuck. I sat there for a few minutes, worrying that the milkshakes were slowly melting whilst I couldn't make a decision. Mum ended up interrupting my minor panic attack by saying she didn't mind. It was simple. I could either have this, she gestured towards her drink, or that, and she gestured to my drink. Well, bless her, I know she tried to help, but all it did was make me panic more. I realised I kind of wanted both, so I came up with this idea to mix them both together. That way it was fair. We both got a mixture of chocolate and vanilla. Instead of simply saying this instead of simply saying this though, my brain decided I needed to get the information across quicker, and decided to smash the words this and that together. I'll point out, I think my dyslexia probably played some part in this, but I don't think it's completely to blame. Anyway, what came out of my mouth was not only not a mix of the words this and that, but a swear word a 10-year-old probably shouldn't have yelled as excitedly as I did in a McDonald's. The word I yelled, and I'll spell it out for you, was TWAT. It rhymes with hat, if that helps. My mum was pretty shocked, to say the least, having her 10-year-old yell a swear word in McDonald's. A lot of the other customers were also quite shocked. And I was pretty mortified, because when I turned around, there were about 20 or so people stopping what they were doing and staring at me. Well, my face was basically the colour of a beetroot at this point, because I didn't realise I'd said anything bad. All I knew that suddenly silence had happened, everyone had stopped, and everyone was staring at me. So I did what probably most kids would do. I just jumped out the booth, ran out the door, and noped my way out of that situation. I legged it back to my mum's house, which, to be fair, it was only 2 minutes round the corner. And I sat outside, breathing fairly heavily, waiting for her to get to me. She showed up about 5 minutes later, not only with our 2 original milkshakes, but another chocolate one for me, so I could mix them together or drink them both or do whatever I wanted. She understood what I'd meant, and she wasn't mad, but she explained to me that the word I'd said meant something rather private, and I probably shouldn't say it again, and definitely not in person, and definitely not in the middle of McDonald's, and definitely not yelling it. She found it really funny, and it was a story she liked to remind me of pretty often. Now, I did not find it funny at the time, but I do now, because if my kid did that, I'd also laugh. That's going to be it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed these stories about my mum. I know it was a little sad starting off, but if you've got any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. I have plenty of stories about my mum, so there's no doubt I'll be telling some more in the future. But if you enjoyed what you saw and what you heard, give me a subscribe, give me a like, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!